Officer, step out of the vehicle! Do it now! Officer, I am complying, but I need to know why.
We got a call about a vehicle matching this plate involved in a felony transport.
That is impossible. This is an official state vehicle. I am the...
I don't care who you are! Turn around! Hands behind your back!
Mistake, son.
A very expensive mistake!
The camera is already recording when the patrol vehicle comes to a stop on the shoulder of a U.S. highway. Traffic continues to move at speed. Wind noise carries across the open lanes. According to the footage, the encounter begins as a routine highway stop. There is no visible emergency. There is no active threat recorded on camera at this stage. What the officer does not acknowledge on the recording is that the individual now being detained is a sitting U.S. governor. Not introduced by title, but by function. A governor who, by office, signs executive directives that govern statewide law enforcement priorities. A governor whose administration allocates funding for highway patrol operations. A governor whose desk receives reports evaluating police conduct and compliance with constitutional standards. Those actions exist independent of this roadside stop. The irony is structural, not personal. The first decision point arrives quickly. According to the footage, the officer proceeds beyond a basic traffic inquiry and moves into detention. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed. The governor remains present at the scene. There is no indication on camera of flight or resistance disclosed in the official footage. The officer continues the stop rather than disengaging or clarifying authority through supervisory channels. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. The second decision point follows. The officer escalates from detention to arrest on the highway shoulder. This is no longer a temporary restraint. This is a custodial action taken in public view, with dashcam and bodycam capturing positioning, tone, and sequence. This decision removed the last routine exit available during a traffic stop. Authority reversal becomes unavoidable here. The individual being placed under arrest is not merely a civilian subject to enforcement. This is an official whose role includes evaluating executive compliance, approving budgets that fund departments like this one, and exercising veto power over legislation affecting law enforcement authority. None of that stops the arrest. The camera continues to roll. A third decision point appears as the officer maintains custody rather than pausing for verification or supervisory review. According to the footage, there is no immediate effort to de-escalate once the arrest posture is established. This was another chance to stop. He didn't. By this point, the consequences are already forming, even if they are not yet visible. A roadside arrest of a sitting governor is not processed solely at the scene. It triggers automatic review layers,
Supervisory notification, internal reporting,
legal exposure assessment. The title already confirms where that chain ends. A decision that will later cost $9 million. The dramatic irony is complete before the cruiser door closes. The camera captures a moment of control exercised in seconds. The financial and legal impact will unfold over months. The commitment of this narrative is simple and unavoidable. This was not about who the person was, but about what decisions were made on camera, and what those decisions would make inevitable. The footage does not show a suspect attempting to flee. It does not show a struggle. It shows a vehicle stopped on a highway shoulder, hazard lights intermittently visible, traffic continuing to pass at speed. According to the recording, the individual later identified as a sitting U.S. governor remains where instructed. There is no recorded attempt to leave the scene once the stop begins. From a legal standpoint, presence matters. A traffic stop on a public highway is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment, but one bounded by purpose. The lawful scope is narrow. Address the reason for the stop, confirm identification, and either issue a citation or disengage. The footage shows the governor remaining within that scope. Hands are visible when required, movement is limited, speech remains controlled. The first legitimacy contrast forms here. The governor's conduct, as captured on camera, aligns with what constitutional standards define as compliant during a stop. The officer's perception, however, begins to diverge. According to the footage, questioning extends beyond traffic-related matters. Time passes without resolution. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed. The second decision point emerges when the stop is prolonged. Prolongation requires justification. The camera does not record a new violation. No additional safety concern is verbally articulated on the recording, yet the detention continues. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. Legitimacy is not about status. It is about lawful presence and behavior. The footage shows no conduct that independently justifies escalation. The governor does not issue orders. There is no invocation of office captured on camera that would alter the legal analysis. This matters. It means the legitimacy gap is not created by entitlement or interference. It is created by inaction on one side and escalation on the other. A third decision point occurs when the officer initiates physical control measures associated with arrest. This is a transition with legal weight. An arrest requires probable cause. The camera becomes the record against which that cause will later be measured. This decision removed his last lawful exit from a routine stop. From this moment, the governor's legitimacy is no longer theoretical. It is procedural. Once arrested, the individual is entitled to standardized protections, clear articulation of charges, safe handling, and timely processing. According to the footage, the arrest occurs roadside, exposed to passing traffic, without visible urgency tied to public safety. This was another chance to stop. He didn't. The authority reversal deepens here, not by declaration, but by implication. The individual now in custody occupies an office that routinely reviews executive enforcement outcomes. Governors approve statewide enforcement initiatives. They receive briefings on compliance failures. They sign or veto legislation governing detention authority. None of that halts the handcuffs. The camera records a system acting without awareness of its own hierarchy. The fourth decision point follows as custody is maintained rather than reassessed. According to the footage, there is no immediate supervisory correction visible. The officer continues processing the arrest as valid. This locks the encounter into a formal chain of review. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed again. The legitimacy gap becomes unavoidable. On one side, the governor's conduct remains static, present, controlled, non-escalatory. On the other, the officer's actions move further from the initial justification. This is not inferred intent. It is visible sequence. Camera time accumulates. Each additional minute strengthens the record. The Fifth Amendment dimension begins to surface indirectly. Custodial detention triggers rights advisements and reporting requirements. The footage shows the physical reality of custody without immediate contextual explanation on camera. This absence will matter later, even if it is not explained now. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. Another decision point appears with transport preparation. Preparing to remove an arrestee from a highway scene escalates risk and responsibility. It signals confidence in the legality of the arrest. According to the footage, this preparation proceeds. This decision removed another opportunity to pause and verify. The legitimacy of the governor's position is now procedural and documented. Compliance has been recorded. Non-resistance has been recorded. The setting has been recorded. What remains unresolved is justification. That imbalance will not be corrected at the roadside. It will be corrected later, in rooms the camera does not enter. By the time the patrol vehicle door closes, the legitimacy question has already been answered by the footage, even if the consequences have not yet surfaced. The governor's lawful presence and conduct are fixed in the record. The decisions that challenge that legitimacy are equally fixed. The narrative has now committed to a path where evidence, not argument, will control the outcome. What follows will determine how this recording moves through supervision, internal review, and legal evaluation, and how a single highway arrest becomes a $9 million consequence. Once the arrest is completed, the encounter exits the roadside and enters a system. According to standard procedure reflected in departmental policy, a custodial arrest initiates reporting obligations that extend beyond the officer at the scene. The footage ends its direct view, but the process it triggers is predictable and structured. The first system decision point occurs with supervisory notification. An arrest of this nature is not processed in isolation. According to departmental norms, arrests conducted on a highway shoulder are flagged for review due to safety exposure and procedural risk. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. Supervisors reviewing the initial report are not tasked with determining motive. Their function is narrower. They evaluate whether the arrest aligns with training standards, constitutional limits, and departmental protocols. The body cam and dash cam footage become primary reference points. Written justifications are weighed against what the camera records. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed. The second decision point emerges when the arrest is accepted into the system without immediate correction. Acceptance does not imply endorsement of outcome. It signals that the encounter will proceed through formal channels rather than being resolved informally. This decision removed the last opportunity for on-scene remediation. Departmental culture matters here, but not in the abstract. According to public record processes, law enforcement agencies rely on layered review precisely to correct individual error. The absence of immediate supervisory reversal shifts the burden forward. What might have ended as a corrected stop now becomes an institutional record. A third decision point appears with internal reporting. Arrest documentation requires articulation of probable cause, justification for escalation, and compliance with constitutional standards. These documents are reviewed against footage. Discrepancies are not interpreted emotionally, they are logged. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. As the report moves upward, the authority reversal intensifies quietly. The arrestee is a sitting U.S. governor, not as a symbol, but as a procedural fact. Governors are routinely briefed on departmental performance metrics. They approve statewide public safety funding. They receive summaries of civil liability exposure tied to enforcement actions. None of this alters the review criteria. It alters the stakes. The fourth decision point occurs when the matter advances to internal affairs rather than being administratively closed. Internal affairs review is not punitive by default. It is investigative. According to standard practice, IA evaluates adherence to policy, training, and constitutional requirements. This transition confirms that the arrest raised compliance questions that could not be resolved at lower levels. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed again. Internal affairs review relies on sequence. What was the initial basis for the stop? What justified prolongation? What justified arrest? Each step is assessed independently. The footage does not change. The narrative around it does. This is where escalation decisions made earlier begin to compound. Another decision point follows with departmental leadership awareness. When leadership is notified, the focus shifts from individual conduct to institutional exposure. According to public sector legal frameworks, arrests involving high-ranking officials trigger risk assessment protocols. This is not preferential treatment, it is damage control. This was another chance to stop. It didn't happen earlier. At this level, the department's legal counsel becomes involved. Their role is defensive and procedural. They assess whether the arrest can withstand judicial scrutiny and whether early settlement considerations are warranted. According to standard municipal practice, counsel reviews footage, reports, and applicable constitutional standards. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. The fifth decision point occurs when the department elects to defend the arrest procedurally rather than immediately concede error. This decision narrows future options. Once a position is taken in internal review, shifting later becomes more costly. This decision removed another lawful exit, not from the arrest, but from its aftermath. Throughout this process, no motive is assigned. None is required. Systems do not operate on intent. They operate on documentation. The authority reversal remains implicit. The individual in custody is an executive who routinely oversees statewide enforcement outcomes. The department reviewing the arrest operates under statutory frameworks that executive offices help shape. The camera does not comment on this. It does not need to. The sixth decision point appears when the matter advances beyond internal affairs into formal legal review. At this stage, the question is no longer whether policy was followed, it is whether constitutional violations are now alleged. According to public record processes, this transition signals potential financial exposure. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed to dollars and timelines. What began as a highway stop is now an institutional event. Each layer that declined to halt or correct the arrest added weight. Each review that accepted the prior decision carried it forward. None of these steps required malice. They required only continuation. By the end of this phase, the outcome is no longer controlled by the officer or even the department alone. External review becomes inevitable. The footage has moved beyond internal corridors. It is now positioned to determine not just accountability, but cost. The system has finished making its choices. What follows will show how evidence moves once it leaves internal control and enters formal investigation, and how silence on camera becomes louder than any report. The escalation is not marked by a single dramatic act. It unfolds through sequence. According to the footage, the arrest transitions from a static roadside position into controlled movement. The governor is guided along the shoulder, away from the stopped vehicle, toward the patrol car. Traffic noise remains constant. The environment does not change. The legal posture does. The first escalation point in this phase occurs with positioning. Arrests conducted on a highway shoulder introduce risk. Policy generally favors minimizing exposure time near active lanes. According to the recording, the officer proceeds without relocating to a safer area before continuing custody actions. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed. The second escalation appears with restraint management. The footage shows restraint maintained while instructions continue. There is no visible resistance recorded. The purpose of restraint at this stage is control, not correction. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. The camera captures spacing. Distance between officer and subject narrows and widens as instructions are issued. No additional justification for continued custody is articulated on camera. The absence is not commentary. It is record. This decision removed another lawful exit. A third escalation point follows, as the patrol car becomes the focal point. Opening the rear door is procedural but consequential. It signals completion of arrest processing and intent to transport. According to standard legal interpretation, this step solidifies custody. This was another chance to stop. He didn't. Once the door opens, the environment compresses. Highway noise dulls. The frame tightens. According to the footage, the governor is seated without recorded resistance. Hands remain controlled. The officer's movements are methodical. There is no urgency tied to public safety visible at this stage. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed again. The fourth escalation arises not from action, but from omission. There is no recorded pause to verify authority or consult supervisory direction at the moment transport begins. Highway stops allow discretion. That discretion is no longer exercised. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. As the vehicle prepares to depart, the dashcam records traffic passing uninterrupted. The arrest is now mobile. Once transport begins, internal timelines activate, booking procedures, notification chains, documentation clocks. This decision removed the last practical opportunity for correction before institutional processes lock in. The authority reversal sharpens here. The subject in the rear seat occupies an office that routinely reviews statewide enforcement outcomes. Governors receive briefings on arrest data, civil exposure, and policy compliance. None of that alters the physical reality recorded by the camera. Authority is present in the system, not at the scene. A fifth escalation point occurs when the officer continues transport without reassessment. Transport converts the stop into a custodial event that will be reviewed under higher scrutiny. According to legal standards, any defect at this stage multiplies downstream impact. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed into formal review territory. The camera captures silence between instructions. There is no visible confrontation, no escalation of tone recorded. The significance lies in continuation. Each mile traveled commits the arrest further into process. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. Arrival at the processing location marks the sixth escalation. Entry into a controlled facility triggers additional documentation requirements. According to procedure, custody transfer requires confirmation of arrest basis. The footage transitions, but the sequence does not reset. This was another chance to stop. He didn't. Inside the facility, movement slows. Doors close. Ambient noise changes. The arrest is no longer visible to the public roadway, but it remains fully documented. The legal posture is now insulated from immediate correction. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed into fixed record. A seventh escalation point appears, with processing steps that assume validity of arrest, fingerprinting, holding protocols. Each action does not create justification, it relies on it. According to procedural standards, these steps compound liability if the underlying arrest lacks support. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. The escalation is now complete. What began as discretionary enforcement has become custodial fact. The camera has captured enough sequence to allow later reconstruction without interpretation. Timestamps, positioning, tone, and pacing are all preserved. The final escalation in this phase is procedural inertia. Once the arrest enters the system, momentum replaces discretion. Reports are written to match actions already taken. Reviews respond to documentation already created. This decision removed the final informal exit. By the end of this phase, the incident has crossed a threshold. It is no longer defined by what happened on the highway alone. It is defined by how those actions will be evaluated against constitutional standards in hindsight. The setup for silence is complete. Movement has slowed. Authority has shifted away from the scene. The camera no longer needs to capture conflict. The evidence is already fixed. What follows will not involve raised voices or physical force. It will involve review rooms, paused frames, and decisions made without urgency, but with consequence. The room is still. The governor sits upright, hands resting where they were placed. The officer stands a short distance away, posture unchanged. No one speaks. The camera records only movement without direction. Time passes without instruction. Authority shifts without announcement. The silence ends not with sound, but with process. According to standard procedure, footage from the highway stop is logged and preserved. Body cam timestamps align with dash cam angles. The sequence becomes fixed. This is the first evidenti lock. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed. The initial review does not analyze motive, it analyzes sequence. Investigators begin by mapping the stop from first contact to custody. Duration is measured. Transitions are flagged. The moment detention became arrest is isolated. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. A second evidenti decision point appears with supervisory review. Supervisors assess whether the arrest complied with policy governing highway stops and custodial escalation. According to public sector review standards, any arrest involving a high-risk environment requires explicit justification. The footage is replayed. The absence of articulated cause becomes part of the record. This decision removed another lawful exit. Internal Affairs formally opens a case. This is not disciplinary by default. It is investigative. According to standard practice, IA evaluates consistency between written reports and recorded footage. Reports are compared line by line against time-stamped video. Discrepancies are not debated. They are documented. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed again. A third evidenti decision point arises when the investigation timeline extends beyond internal review. According to public records processes, prolonged review indicates unresolved compliance questions. Legal counsel is notified. This signals potential exposure. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. Legal counsel's review reframes the footage. The question shifts from policy adherence to constitutional analysis. Fourth Amendment standards are applied to each phase: stop, detention, arrest, transport. The footage does not argue, it shows. This decision removed the final internal buffer between the department and external scrutiny. The next decision point occurs with evidence preservation orders. Once litigation is anticipated, footage is locked against deletion or alteration. Metadata is secured. Chain of custody documentation is completed. According to standard municipal practice, this step acknowledges that the incident may proceed beyond administrative resolution. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed into litigation territory. External investigators review the same sequence without departmental context. They focus on what is visible, audible, and measurable. Duration without cause. Escalation without articulation. Custody without reassessment. At this stage, reversal was still possible only through early resolution. It was not taken. A further evidenti decision point appears when settlement evaluation begins. City legal review assesses potential damages. According to public sector litigation norms, financial exposure is modeled using precedent and recorded conduct. The number now attached to the case, $9 million, is not assigned emotionally. It is calculated. This decision removed another opportunity to contain the outcome. Throughout this phase, authority continues to reverse silently. The individual arrested is not speaking in these rooms. The footage speaks instead. Governors routinely receive reports like this. Here, the governor is the subject of one. The system operates without regard to office, only to record. The investigation widens. Policy compliance is re-examined. Training materials are reviewed against what the officer did on camera. According to investigators, any deviation documented on video carries weight independent of explanation. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed into inevitability. Another decision point follows when the case is not dismissed internally. Continued progression signals that exposure exceeds tolerance thresholds. Settlement discussions become formal. Numbers replace hypotheticals. At this stage, reversal was still possible only through concession. It was not taken. The evidence phase concludes without spectacle. There are no raised voices, no confrontations, only repeated viewings of the same moments: a highway shoulder, a prolonged stop, a custodial arrest. Each review tightens interpretation. Each pause in the footage amplifies consequence. By the end of this phase, the outcome is no longer speculative. The evidence has completed its journey from camera to calculation. The $9 million figure is no longer a possibility. It is a projection grounded in recorded fact. What remains is not whether the arrest occurred. That is settled. What remains is how the system will account for it and who will bear the cost. The legal consequences do not arrive all at once. They accumulate through procedure. According to court filings referenced during municipal review, the first financial exposure appears internally, long before any public figure is attached. Risk assessments are drafted. Estimated liability ranges are calculated. At this stage, reversal was still possible. It was not taken. The initial consequence is administrative. The arrest is formally classified as a custodial action requiring constitutional justification. Legal reviewers isolate the moment detention became arrest. Timestamps are compared. According to the footage, that transition occurs without a clearly articulated basis recorded on camera. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed into compensable risk. The second consequence emerges when claims are formally asserted. The city receives notice that the arrest has triggered potential civil liability. According to public sector litigation procedures, notice alone obligates preservation, response timelines, and disclosure. This decision removed the final opportunity to quietly resolve the matter internally. As filings progress, the footage becomes central. Legal arguments are anchored not in narrative, but in sequence. Duration of stop, absence of new justification, public arrest environment. Each factor is evaluated independently. According to the record, the arrest does not gain legal support with time. It loses it. At this stage, reversal was still possible through early settlement. It was not taken. The third consequence appears when external counsel becomes involved. Outside review is standard when exposure reaches certain thresholds. According to municipal practice, this indicates that internal defenses are no longer sufficient. The number attached to the case, $9 million, enters formal analysis here, not as a headline, but as a projected outcome. From this point forward, the legal margin narrowed to negotiation rather than defense. Negotiations do not focus on office or identity. They focus on evidence. The footage is replayed in slowed frames. Pauses are measured. Officer positioning is diagrammed. According to legal standards, any constitutional defect multiplies when it results in custodial arrest without adequate cause. This decision removed another potential exit. The fourth consequence unfolds when the city's legal position weakens. According to filings later disclosed, continued defense increases cost rather than reducing it. Litigation risk compounds with time. Settlement becomes the rational option. At this stage, reversal was still possible only by accepting fault. It was not delayed further. The settlement figure, $9 million, is finalized through calculation, not concession. It reflects projected damages, legal fees, and risk mitigation. According to public records, this number represents system accountability rather than individual punishment. From this point forward, the outcome becomes irreversible. A fifth consequence follows immediately. Settlement approval triggers mandatory reporting. Budgets are adjusted. Insurance carriers are notified. Oversight bodies are briefed. The arrest now carries institutional weight beyond the case itself. This was another chance to minimize impact. It no longer exists. The officer's role in this phase is procedural. Employment status, discipline, or termination, if any, are processed separately and are not publicly disclosed in official records within the title's scope. What is disclosed is cost. $9 million transferred as consequence of a single chain of decisions recorded on camera. The authority reversal reaches its final form here. A governor's office routinely reviews settlements like this, often as abstract line items. In this case, the office is connected directly to the event that generated one. The system does not pause to acknowledge the irony. It processes it. The final legal consequence is precedent. According to municipal legal frameworks, settlements of this magnitude alter future decision-making. Training is revisited. Highway stop protocols are reassessed, not because of opinion, but because cost demands it. From this point forward, the legal margin shifts for everyone. The case does not end with a verdict read aloud. It ends with payment authorized, funds allocated, and records archived. The footage remains unchanged. The decisions remain traceable. The cost is now fixed. What remains is not the question of legality. That has been answered financially. What remains is the system's response after the cost is absorbed, and whether the record changes what happens next time. After the settlement is authorized, the system does not return to normal. According to standard municipal process, a payment of this scale triggers mandatory internal review beyond the originating department. Budget committees are briefed. Oversight mechanisms activate. The incident is no longer isolated. It becomes a reference point. Policy review begins without attribution of motive. Highway stop procedures are examined against the footage. Training materials are compared to recorded conduct. According to internal review standards, any deviation captured on camera requires correction, not explanation. This decision to revise policy is not symbolic, it is financial. The authority reversal completes itself here. Governors routinely receive briefings on settlements arising from law enforcement actions. In this case, the office associated with those briefings is directly connected to the event that produced one. The system does not comment on that fact. It absorbs it. Training protocols are updated. Supervisory checklists are amended. According to review documentation, emphasis is placed on decision points: when to disengage, when to verify, when to escalate. The footage is used not as punishment, but as instruction. From this point forward, the legal margin shifts across the department. Oversight reporting extends beyond the department. External monitors review compliance with revised standards. Insurance carriers adjust risk models. According to public sector accountability frameworks, settlements of this magnitude alter premium calculations and exposure thresholds. The impact spreads outward. No public statement alters the record. The footage remains the same. The timestamps do not move. What changes is interpretation. Where discretion once existed, procedure now narrows it. Where escalation was once unchecked, verification becomes mandatory. The officer's individual outcome is processed through employment channels, not publicly disclosed in official records within the scope of the title. What is disclosed is systemic response. Policies change because cost demands it, not because narratives do. The final shift is cultural, not emotional but operational. Officers are reminded that cameras do not capture intent, they capture sequence. Every pause, every continuation, every missed opportunity to stop becomes measurable. This incident reinforces that principle. The settlement closes the case financially, but not functionally. The record enters training libraries. It appears in risk assessments. It is cited internally when decisions are reviewed. The system adapts because it must. There is no speech to conclude this story. There is no apology required for the process to work. The camera recorded a decision. The system calculated its cost. The outcome is irreversible. The highway remains. The patrol cars continue to run. But the margin has changed.